The great pot is shattered.
I did not mean for it to happen, Grandmother.
Welcome, child of the earth. The ancestors speak through me. Hear their wisdom and carry the light.
Amani moved through the crowded city street like a shadow, slipping between people who seemed full of life. Cars honked, vendors shouted, and music played from small shops, but none of it reached him. It was as if a thick wall stood between him and the world. He was in his late 20s, tall and quiet, with tired eyes that looked older than his age. Most days, Amani kept his head down and worked at a small repair shop. His hands were steady with machines, but not with emotions. He rarely smiled, rarely spoke more than a few words, and never allowed himself to think too deeply. Because whenever he slowed down, even for a moment, old memories tried to rise again. Every night, the same nightmare returned. He would see his mother's face, faint and distant, calling his name. Her voice always sounded like it was coming through water, soft, broken, fading. He reached for her, but she slipped away, disappearing into darkness. Then he woke up sweating, heart pounding, and unable to breathe. He told himself it was only a dream. But deep inside, he knew the truth. It was guilt. Guilt that never left him. Guilt tied to a moment he had never forgiven himself for. Amani tried to bury the memories, but they followed him everywhere, on buses, in crowded markets, even in the quiet of his room. He avoided talking about his past. He avoided anything that reminded him of home, his childhood, or the traditions he had run from. And most of all, he avoided thinking about his mother. One evening, as he sat alone at his small table, the phone buzzed. The name on the screen froze him. Grandmother. He hesitated before answering. She hardly called unless something important was happening. Amani, her voice trembled slightly. You must come home. He closed his eyes. The word home felt heavier than it should. There will be a ceremony at the shrine, she continued. A strong one. Your presence is needed. He swallowed hard. Grandmother, you know I don't. You must come, she cut in. This isn't like other times. Her tone was urgent. Even through the phone, he felt the weight of it. After the call ended, Amani sat in silence. He stared at the wall, as if the answers were hidden somewhere on its plain surface. He hadn't returned to the village in years. Not since his mother's passing. Not since the night everything fell apart. He had left quickly, almost running away. And every time the idea of going back crossed his mind, fear wrapped itself around his chest. The village was filled with traditions, rituals, beliefs, and expectations. He had once felt connected to them, but now they felt foreign, like pieces of a life he no longer understood. Going back meant facing the past, facing the memories he had locked away, facing the truth he had never spoken out loud. That night, he barely slept. The nightmare came again, sharper than before. He saw his mother's hand reaching out. He opened his mouth to call to her, but no sound came out. When he woke up, tears were running down his face. By morning, he knew he couldn't ignore the call any longer. His grandmother's voice echoed in his mind. This isn't like other times. Amani packed a small bag. His hands shook slightly, though he tried to steady them. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he also knew he couldn't keep running forever. As he locked his apartment door behind him, a strange feeling washed over him. Something between fear and hope, though he could not name it. The journey back to the village felt longer than it used to. With every mile, the city's noise faded. Trees grew taller. The air felt thicker, carrying scents of earth and distant fires. When the village finally came into view, Amani paused. The place looked familiar, yet somehow changed. Children ran along dusty paths. Women carried baskets on their heads, and the sound of drums echoed faintly from somewhere deeper inside the settlement. But beneath the warm, lively scene, Amani felt something heavier, an old weight pressing against his chest. The past wasn't done with him. It had only been waiting, and now he was back. He took a slow breath, unsure of what waited ahead. All he knew was that the path he had avoided for years was opening again, and he could no longer step around it. This was the beginning of truths he had never faced, the beginning of a journey he did not yet understand. Amani stepped into the village with slow, cautious steps, as if the ground itself remembered him. The warm air wrapped around him, carrying the familiar scent of smoke, dust, and fresh crops. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching life move around him like a scene from a memory he had tried to erase. Women laughed near the well, washing clothes and trading stories. Children ran past him with joyful screams, their bare feet kicking up small clouds of red sand. Old houses made of clay and withstood just as he remembered, weathered but proud. The place was alive, full of color and sound, yet Amani felt like a stranger walking through someone else's home. He took a few more steps, feeling the weight of his return settle on his shoulders. Every familiar sight brought back a flash of the boy he once was, curious, hopeful, running behind his mother as she called for him to slow down. The memories came quickly, almost too fast, and he had to steady himself. Then he saw his uncle. The older man stood outside his hut, arms crossed, expression unreadable. His face was lined, his eyes sharp as ever. Amani felt his stomach tighten. They had never been close, not even when his mother was alive. His uncle had always believed that family duty came before personal choice, and Amani had been the one who left. Amani, the uncle said, not warmly, not coldly, just with a tone that carried years of unspoken judgment. Amani nodded silently. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The silence held tension, as if the air between them was stretched thin. Then his uncle turned and walked back toward the gathering area without looking back, expecting Amani to follow. As they moved deeper into the village, Amani felt eyes on him. Elders sitting under the shade of a large tree paused their conversation to watch him. Their expressions were mixed, some curious, some disapproving, others simply observing. He knew what they were thinking. The boy who left, the one who didn't come back for years, the one who didn't even attend the full mourning period for his mother. Shame stung him, but he kept walking. His grandmother's hut stood near the center of the village, surrounded by tall grass and bright yellow flowers she planted every year. She stepped outside when she saw him coming. Her small frame trembled slightly, but her eyes were warm. She opened her arms, and he embraced her gently, feeling her hold him with the softness only she had ever given him. "It's good you came," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. After a short rest, she guided him toward the shrine. The path twisted behind the village, passing through thick trees and uneven ground. The closer they got, the quieter the world became. It was as though even the wind softened out of respect. When the shrine came into view, Amani felt a cold shiver run through him. It stood in a small clearing, a circular structure made of stone and old wood, covered in carvings that told stories of ancestors and the blessings they once gave. Clay pots of different sizes were placed neatly on raised platforms, each one carefully shaped and painted with symbols of protection. They were said to hold the prayers of families, the guidance of elders, and the voices of those who had passed on. Amani remembered helping his mother paint those pots when he was little. The memory hit him with a sting. Her gentle laughter, her patience, the way she explained the meaning behind every symbol. He could almost see her kneeling by the pots, sunlight touching her face. His grandmother touched his arm lightly. "This place remembers all who come here," she said, "and it remembers those who stayed away." He looked at the shrine again, feeling something deep inside him stir. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something heavier, like a truth waiting to rise from the ground. As they turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Not a person, but something older, an unseen presence settling over him. It pressed on his chest, urging him to look inward, to remember what he had buried. A sudden image flashed in his mind, his mother's eyes filled with disappointment and pain. He blinked hard, pushing the vision away. But the sensation lingered. This land had not forgotten him, and it would not let him hide. As they walked back toward the village, drums began to beat in the distance, slow, steady, calling people to gather. Amani felt the sound move through his body, each beat reminding him that something important was coming, something he could no longer escape. He had returned home, but home was not finished with him. The drums grew louder as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Villagers moved toward the clearing near the shrine, carrying baskets of flowers, candles, and new clay pots for the ritual. The air felt charged, as if the ancestors themselves were waiting. Amani followed at a distance, unsure of his place. He had not planned to take part, yet every step he took pulled him closer to the ceremony. His grandmother walked beside him slowly, her hand brushing his arm from time to time, as if to remind him he was not alone, even if he felt like it. When they reached the shrine clearing, the crowd had already formed a large circle around the elders. Torches flickered on tall wooden stands, casting long shadows that moved like silent spirits. The scent of burning herbs drifted through the air. Amani tried to stay near the back, but his presence did not go unnoticed. Whispers rose from the crowd. Some faces showed curiosity, others judgment, and a few looked almost fearful. The lead elder, a tall man with white paint across his forehead, lifted his staff and called for silence. "The ancestors gather near," he said. "They hear our voices tonight." The crowd bowed their heads. Amani felt his chest tighten. He remembered standing in this circle as a child, holding his mother's hand, feeling safe. Now, he felt exposed, like every mistake he had ever made was written on his skin. The elder's gaze moved slowly across the crowd and then stopped on Amani. "You," he said, "come forward." Amani froze. His legs refused to move at first. His grandmother gave him a small, encouraging nod, but even that couldn't steady the tremor in his stomach. I shouldn't," Amani tried to say, but the words barely left his throat. "It is an honor," the elder replied, though his tone held something heavier. "Your mother once stood here with pride. Tonight, you will stand in her place." The crowd parted as Amani walked forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. He could sense people staring at him, waiting, judging, remembering the years he spent away. In front of the elders lay a row of clay pots, beautifully crafted, painted with old symbols of protection and blessing. Each pot belonged to a family, holding their prayers for the future. The elder lifted one of the pots and held it toward Amani. "Carry this with respect," he said. "It holds the voice of your bloodline." Amani reached out, but his hands were trembling. The pot felt warm, almost alive, as though it carried a heartbeat. He lifted it carefully and stepped into the center of the circle. Drums began again, slow, steady, rhythmic. The villagers started chanting, their voices rising like a wave. Amani tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. Sweat gathered on his forehead. His chest rose and fell too fast. The beating drums mixed with the pounding of his heart, creating a dizzying rhythm that made it hard to think. His hands began to shake harder. He tried to tighten his grip, but the fear inside him kept growing. He felt that same presence from earlier, the unseen force watching him, pressing into him, almost pushing against his back. The chanting grew louder. The lights from the torches blurred in his vision. "Amani," someone whispered behind him. He jerked, startled. The pot slipped. In one terrible instant, everything slowed down. The clay pot fell from his hands. It hit the ground and shattered. The sound echoed through the clearing like a scream. Gasps broke the chanting. Mothers pulled their children closer. Elders turned their faces away, some in shock, others in anger. Breaking a shrine pot was not just a mistake. It was a taboo, a sign of disrespect, a warning of spiritual imbalance. Some believed it called ancestral wrath. Amani couldn't move. His whole body froze as he stared at the broken pieces scattered at his feet. Shame burned through him, hot and sharp. He tried to speak, to explain, to apologize, but nothing came out. "Silence," the elder yelled. The crowd fell still. Amani felt his pulse hammering in his ears. His vision blurred, not from dizziness this time, but from the tears building behind his eyes. Then, from the darkest corner of the shrine, from a shadow untouched by torchlight, a soft voice whispered his name. Amani. He knew that voice. His heart stopped. It was impossible, unreal, wrong. But the sound wrapped around him, gentle, familiar, full of sadness. His mother's voice. "Amani." His breath caught. His knees buckled. He looked around wildly, but the villagers stood frozen, their faces pale. They had heard nothing, but they could see the terror on his face. "No," Amani whispered. "No, this can't." The voice called again, clearer this time, as if drifting from a place between worlds. Fear slammed into him like a wave. Confusion followed. Then grief, deep, raw, crushing. His legs gave way. He collapsed to the ground, hands shaking violently as the villagers stared in horror. Some stepped back, some clutched charms around their necks. Others whispered prayers under their breath. To them, Amani looked like a man touched by something no one should hear. He covered his face, shaking, tears falling freely as the crowd closed in with fear and judgment. The broken pot lay beside him, silent proof of everything falling apart. The drums had stopped, but the echo of his mother's voice still lingered in the air around him. And the night felt colder, much colder. The night after the ceremony felt heavier than any Amani had lived before. He sat alone inside his grandmother's hut, trembling as he replayed the moment over and over. The pot falling from his hands, the loud crack of clay hitting the ground, and then that voice. Her voice. His mother's voice. He kept telling himself it was in his mind, a trick caused by fear and guilt. But the memory of it felt too real, too close. It was like the sound had touched something deep inside him, something he had buried years ago. Outside, the village remained quiet. People were afraid. They had seen him collapse at the shrine, seen the way terror filled his eyes. Spiritual matters were taken seriously here, and everyone whispered behind closed doors. Amani pressed his hands to his face, trying to calm the shaking. It wasn't real, he whispered. It couldn't be real. His grandmother watched him from across the room, her eyes soft and worried. She didn't rush him. She didn't pressure him. She simply waited, like she knew the storm inside him needed time to settle. But the storm did not settle. The next morning, Amani walked to the riverbank to clear his head. The sun was bright, sparkling on the water, and the sound of flowing waves brought a slight peace. He knelt beside the river, dipping his hands in the cool water. "What is happening to me?" he whispered. "Why now? Why after all these years?" A soft breeze brushed his face. Then he heard it again. Amani. He froze. His breath caught in his chest. Slowly, he lifted his head, turning left, then right. No one was there. But the voice had been clear, gentle, calm, almost sad. The same voice that had sung him to sleep when he was small. The same voice he had ignored the night she tried to speak to him. "No," he said, backing away from the water. "Not here. Not again." But the voice came once more, this time softer, as if asking him not to run. "Amani." His legs weakened. He sank into the grass, holding his chest as memories flooded back, memories he had tried to escape. He remembered being a teenager, angry and stubborn. He remembered shouting at his mother, refusing to listen to her advice. He remembered storming out of the house the night she had tried to tell him something important. And he remembered waking up the next day to the news that she had passed in her sleep. The guilt had suffocated him ever since. Now, the voice from the river seemed to reach into that guilt, stirring it like a wound reopening. Later that day, Amani returned to his grandmother's hut, shaken and exhausted. She noticed the fear in his eyes even before he spoke. "Grandmother," he said in a rough, trembling voice, "I heard her. I heard Mama, not only at the shrine, but at the river too." His grandmother closed her eyes, as if she had expected this. "What does it mean?" Amani asked. "Am I losing my mind?" She shook her head gently. "No, child. You are not losing anything. You are finally facing what you have kept hidden." Amani looked at her, confused, almost desperate for answers. She sighed, her voice soft but steady. "There is something you never knew about the night your mother passed." Amani felt his stomach twist. "What do you mean?" "She tried to speak to you," his grandmother said. "She wanted to tell you something important. But you were angry. You walked away before she could finish." Amani felt the words like sharp stones in his chest. "I know," he whispered. "I've never forgiven myself." His grandmother placed a hand over his. "Your mother never blamed you. She was worried for you. She felt your anger, but she also felt your pain." Amani lowered his head. Shame burned deep in his throat. She tried to call you again that night, his grandmother continued softly. But her strength was fading. She passed before she could reach you. Tears filled Amani's eyes. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you shut yourself off, she answered. You left before we could explain. Your pain pushed you away. He covered his face with both hands. The truth felt unbearable. All the years of silence, all the nights he wished he could hear her again. Now she was reaching out, and all he felt was fear. His grandmother squeezed his hand. A voice like hers does not come to harm you. It comes to guide you. But it feels wrong, Amani whispered. It feels like I'm being followed. You're being called, she corrected gently. Not followed. She wants you to listen, to let go, to face what you ran from. Amani felt the room tilt slightly. The idea of facing his past terrified him. But the voice, soft and sorrowful, kept returning, not to hurt him, but to remind him of what he had lost. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every shadow looked alive. Every sound felt meaningful. He lay awake, replaying his grandmother's words again and again. The voice was not a punishment. It was not anger. It was grief calling to grief. It wanted connection. It wanted healing. And deep down, Amani knew this was only the beginning. Amani woke the next morning feeling even heavier than the night before. Sleep hadn't brought rest. It had only brought more questions, questions he feared he was not ready to answer. The voice of his mother echoed in his mind, soft yet powerful, like it was waiting for him to finally stop running. He stepped outside the hut. The village was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. People watched him from a distance, pretending to go about their routines. They whispered behind their hands. They avoided eye contact. Word had already spread that Amani had heard a spirit's voice. He knew how it must look. He knew how strange it sounded. But no one understood what it meant to hear the voice of someone you loved and lost. Someone whose last words you never let yourself hear. Amani walked slowly toward the old path behind the village, the one that led to a place he hadn't visited in years. A place he had avoided because it reminded him of everything he regretted. His mother's grave. The air grew cooler as he walked through the tall grass. Birds hopped between branches, their songs light and careless, a cruel contrast to the storm inside his chest. His steps slowed when he reached the small clearing. There it was, the simple stone, the familiar shape, the name carved into it. Mama, he whispered, his voice breaking. Kneeling down, he brushed away the fallen leaves from the surface. His fingers shook. He felt the weight of years pressing into his heart. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. The world around him stayed still. No wind, no sound, no sign. And then, Amani, the voice again. He froze, tears already sliding down his face. It didn't come from behind him. It didn't come from the trees. It felt like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. He shut his eyes. Mama, what do you want from me? Why now? The voice grew slightly clearer. Not angry, not accusing. Just sad, like it carried years of longing. You left before I could tell you. Amani's heart pounded. His breathing turned unsteady. Tell me what? He asked shakily. What did you want to say? But the voice faded, slipping away like fog. Please, he cried out. Don't disappear. Please. Silence swallowed the clearing. He dug his fingers into the earth in frustration. Every unanswered question felt like a fresh cut. Every moment of silence felt like punishment. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't punishment. Maybe it was a path he needed to walk. He stayed at the grave for a long time, letting memories rise. His mother's gentle eyes, her warm hands, her tired smile after long days of work. He remembered how she tried to guide him, how she tried to speak to him the night before she died. He had been so blinded by his anger, too proud to listen, too stubborn to understand that she was trying to protect him. When he returned home later that afternoon, his grandmother was sitting outside the hut, waiting. She could tell immediately that something had changed. You went to her, she said softly. Amani nodded. I had to. I heard her again. His grandmother looked at him with a deep, understanding grief only elders carry. Your mother's spirit is reaching out because something is unfinished, she said. There's truth you must face, Amani. Truth she carried in her heart until her last breath. Amani swallowed hard. What truth? She hesitated, as if deciding whether he was ready. Finally, she motioned for him to sit beside her. There was a night, she began, months before she died, when your mother came to me with fear in her eyes. She said she had something important to tell you. Something she had learned, something she had kept hidden because she didn't know how you would react. Amani felt the hairs on his neck rise. What was it? His grandmother looked toward the hills beyond the village. Your father's death was not as simple as you believed. Amani's breath caught. What do you mean? He died in an accident. Everyone said so. That is what we told you, she said softly. But it wasn't the whole truth. Amani felt the world tilt. His grandmother continued. Your mother discovered something that night, something about your father's last hours. She wanted to tell you, but you were angry. You refused to listen. A tremor went up Amani's spine. Why didn't you tell me? Because she wanted to tell you herself, his grandmother whispered. It was her burden, not mine. He stared at the ground, hands trembling. So she died, carrying that truth alone. She died loving you, his grandmother corrected. But yes, she carried a weight she never set down. Amani felt tears rising again. The voice that kept calling him suddenly made more sense. His mother was reaching from the other side, trying to speak the words she never got to say. His grandmother touched his shoulder gently. If you wish to understand her voice, you must find the truth she left behind. Only then will her spirit rest. Only then will you find peace. Amani nodded slowly, wiping his face. I will find it, he whispered. I will uncover everything she wanted to tell me. But as he spoke those words, a chill crept through him. Because deep down, he sensed something. The truth he was seeking was not going to be gentle. It was going to hurt. And still, he knew he had no choice. This was the path his mother was calling him toward, and he had finally begun to walk it. The night felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself understood what Amani had learned. He couldn't stop thinking about the secret his mother had carried. His father, his death, the truth she had never spoken. His grandmother's words repeated in his mind like a drumbeat. If you wish to understand her voice, you must find the truth she left behind. Amani lay awake long after the village lights went out. The silence around him felt sharp. Every thought felt heavier. Every breath felt like it carried the weight of years. Finally, he sat up. He couldn't just lie there and wait. He had to do something. He rose quietly and walked to his mother's old room, untouched since her passing. His grandmother kept it exactly as it had been, out of respect, out of love. Amani pushed the curtain aside and stepped in slowly. The room smelled faintly of old fabric and dried herbs. The moonlight filtered through the window, casting gentle shadows over the walls. Everything looked the same as he remembered. Her folded clothes, her comb, the dried flowers she once collected. He whispered, "Mama, if there's something you want me to know, please guide me." For a moment, nothing happened. But then a soft breeze slipped through the window, even though the night outside was still. Amani felt a chill run up his arms. The breeze brushed past him and drifted toward the old wooden chest at the back of the room. His eyes followed it. The chest had belonged to his mother. She kept her most important things inside, things she didn't want others to touch. Amani approached it slowly, his heart pounding. He knelt down and lifted the lid. Inside were familiar items. A scarf she used to wear, a few bracelets, a worn-out book of prayers, and a small wooden box with a carved pattern. He reached for the box. As soon as his hand touched it, he heard it. Amani, her voice. Soft, close, almost right behind him. He froze, gripping the box tightly. He didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He just listened. The voice didn't speak again, but the feeling it left behind was clear. This box mattered. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a folded letter sealed with a piece of faded red string. Amani stared at it, his throat tightening. The handwriting on the outside was familiar, his mother's. His fingers shook as he untied the string and unfolded the letter. The paper was old, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were still clear. It began with his name. My dear son, if you are reading this, then I was not able to speak to you that night. Amani swallowed hard. His eyes stung with tears. He kept reading. I tried to tell you something important, something I had discovered about your father. I know you were angry with me, and I understand why. But please, Amani, I need you to hear me now. Amani felt his heart twist. He whispered, Mama, why didn't you tell me sooner? He continued reading. Your father's death was not an accident. He was not alone that night. There were things happening in our village, things he tried to protect us from. Amani's chest tightened. Someone came to him, someone he trusted, and your father never returned. The words blurred as tears fell from Amani's eyes. Someone he trusted, someone from the village, someone still alive? His breathing quickened. He read on, even though every word felt like a weight pressing harder on his chest. I stayed quiet because I feared for you. I feared you would go searching for answers and endanger yourself. But you deserve to know the truth, even if I can no longer speak it to you. Amani wiped his face with shaking hands. His mother had carried all this alone. She had lived with fear and grief while raising him. He whispered, Mama, I didn't know. I didn't know you were hurting like this. The letter continued. There is someone in the village who knows what happened. Someone who saw the last person your father met. You must speak to Elder Kalo. He knows the truth. Amani froze. Elder Kalo, a respected elder, a man who had watched Amani grow up, a man who had comforted the family when his father died. Why hadn't he said anything? Why hide it? The last lines of the letter were the hardest to read. Amani, my son, I love you. I always will. I prayed for the day you would forgive yourself, even though you did nothing wrong. I hope this truth brings you peace, and I hope you find the strength to face what comes next. The letter ended there. Amani lowered the paper and covered his face with both hands. For years, he had hated himself for not listening to her, for walking out, for losing her before he could say he was sorry. But now, he realized she had been trying to protect him. She had carried the truth because she feared it would destroy him. He whispered into the quiet room, Mama, forgive me. I'm so sorry. The room stayed still. But then, he felt it again. A soft presence. Warm, gentle, like a hand resting on his shoulder. And this time, the voice was clearer than ever. Amani, find the truth. He lifted his head slowly. He wasn't alone, not spiritually, not emotionally. His mother was still guiding him. He folded the letter carefully, pressed it to his chest, and stood up. His mother had trusted him with her final secret. Now, he had to do what she could not. He had to confront Elder Kalo, and he had to uncover what really happened the night his father died. Amani walked out of his mother's room with the letter clutched tightly in his hand. The night air felt colder now, sharper, as if the whole village held its breath. Elder Kalo's house stood near the center of the village, lit only by a small lantern outside. The warm glow looked harmless, but Amani's heart felt heavy. He hesitated at the door. Was he ready? Could he really face a man who might have hidden the truth about his father for years? He swallowed hard and knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened slowly, and Elder Kalo appeared. His face looked older than Amani remembered, wrinkled, tired, and shadowed by a sadness Amani had never noticed before. Amani, the elder whispered. I wondered when you would come. Those words made Amani's skin prickle. He expected this? Can we talk? Amani asked, his voice steady but tight. Elder Kalo stepped aside, allowing him in. The house was simple and dimly lit, with dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. Amani sat across from the elder at a small wooden table. Kalo let out a long breath. You found her letter, didn't you? Amani nodded. Why didn't you ever tell us the truth? The old man's eyes softened, and Amani saw guilt, deep, old guilt, hidden there. It wasn't my secret to tell, Kalo said. Your mother made me promise. She feared what the truth might do to you. Amani's hands curled into fists. I had the right to know. Yes, Kalo whispered, lowering his head. But she was your mother. She wanted to protect you, even when it hurt her. Amani felt anger, confusion, and sorrow battling inside him. What really happened the night my father died? He asked. Tell me everything. Kalo closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to speak. When your father died, he began, we said it was an accident, a hunting trip gone wrong. But the truth is, he was meeting someone who felt threatened by the decision your father made. What decision? Amani asked. Your father wanted to expose the corruption among a few powerful men in the village, Kalo explained. He believed they were using the shrine for their own gain. He planned to speak out, but before he could, he disappeared. Amani stared at him, the room feeling smaller and colder. You knew, Amani whispered. Kalo bowed his head. I saw him meet the man that night, but I didn't know he wouldn't return. I didn't know fear would silence me until it was too late. Amani felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. His father wasn't reckless. He wasn't irresponsible. He was brave, too brave, and it cost him his life. And my mother? Amani asked softly. Did she know? Kalo nodded. She learned the truth a few days later. She wanted to tell you, but you were young and angry. When your father died, you blamed her for not letting you go with him. That anger cut her deeply. The memory hit Amani like a punch. He remembered the shouting. He remembered storming out. He remembered the hurt look on his mother's face, one he chose not to understand. He had thought she was being controlling. He had thought she didn't trust him. He didn't know she was keeping him safe. Amani felt his chest tighten as tears gathered in his eyes. Kalo's voice softened. Your mother's last days were heavy. She tried so hard to speak to you, to explain, but your anger kept you distant. And when she fell ill, she didn't want to burden you. Amani's throat burned. I should have listened. I should have been there. Kalo shook his head gently. She never blamed you. Not once. She only wished for your heart to heal. Amani closed his eyes, and the memories flooded back. Vivid, painful, overwhelming. He saw himself as a teenager, full of anger and confusion. He saw his mother holding out her hand, trying to speak, while he turned away. He heard her calling his name, her voice cracking, and he saw her eyes, filled with fear and love at the same time. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was desperation. Desperation to protect him from a truth she carried alone. Amani pressed a hand over his chest, feeling the weight of years lifting slowly, painfully. Why is she calling me now? He asked quietly. Kalo looked at him with sad, gentle eyes. Because your heart is finally open enough to hear her. Amani breathed shakily. The anger inside him was no longer burning. It was breaking apart, piece by piece, revealing the grief underneath. What do I do now? He whispered. Kalo placed a hand over Amani's. You face the past, fully, in the shrine. Only then will the voice rest. Amani nodded slowly, knowing the path ahead would hurt, but knowing it was time. As he stepped out of the elder's house and into the quiet night, he felt something shift inside him. He was no longer running. He was walking toward the truth, toward forgiveness, toward his mother. The sky was still dark when Amani reached the shrine. Dawn was only a whisper behind the hills, giving the world a soft gray glow. The air felt cool and quiet, like the village itself was watching him. Waiting, Amani held the newly crafted clay pot in both hands. It was simple, smooth, round, and warm from the kiln. His grandmother had helped him mold it the day before, guiding his fingers like she used to when he was small. She had told him clay carried stories. And this pot, she said, would carry his mother's. Now he walked toward the shrine with steady steps, the letter tucked safely in his pocket. Today was the cleansing ritual, something the elders claimed would wash away anger, guilt, or spiritual unrest. But to Amani, this wasn't punishment anymore. It was a promise to himself, to his ancestors, and especially to his mother. The villagers were already gathering near the shrine. Some looked curious. Others still looked afraid of him. But Amani didn't flinch. For the first time since he returned, he didn't care about their whispers. His grandmother stood near the steps of the shrine. When she saw him, her eyes softened with pride. Are you ready, my child? She asked gently. Amani nodded. I am. She stepped aside, allowing him to climb the stone steps alone. The shrine's entrance glowed with flickering candles. He could feel the past around him, the prayers spoken here, the tears shed, the secrets kept and revealed. He imagined his mother standing in this very place, asking the ancestors for strength while carrying the truth that had nearly broken her. A deep breath filled his lungs. It was time. He placed the clay pot carefully on the altar, where broken pieces of the shattered pot had been swept away days earlier. This one stood whole, steady, waiting. His grandmother began the ritual chant below. Her voice was soft but strong, rising through the morning air in a language older than any memory he carried. The villagers joined in slowly, their voices blending like one steady heartbeat. Amani lifted a small gourd of river water, the surface shimmering faintly. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He poured the water gently into the clay pot. As the water filled the pot, Amani felt something inside him loosen, something that had been tied in painful knots for years. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered, even though no one around him could hear. "I'm sorry for the anger, for walking away, for not understanding." A soft breeze brushed across his cheek. Amani closed his eyes, and there she was. Her voice, calm, warm, and full of love, floated around him like sunlight breaking through a storm. "My son, I never held your anger against you." Amani's breath caught. Tears blurred his vision. The voice came again, gentle as a mother pulling a blanket over a child. "You were hurting. I knew that. I always knew your heart." His chest tightened, then loosened as he exhaled shakily. "You carried guilt that was never yours. Let go, Amani." He opened his eyes slowly, feeling tears fall down his cheeks. The clay pot glowed softly in the early morning light, the water inside rippling as if touched by unseen hands. His grandmother's chanting grew stronger, wrapping around him like a warm blanket. The villagers' voices joined, no longer fearful, only respectful. Amani placed both hands on the pot, leaning forward slightly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for loving me even when I made mistakes, for protecting me, for watching over me." Another breeze passed through him, warm, peaceful. The voice came one last time, softer than before, almost fading into the air. "I'm at peace, my son. Now you must find yours." Amani lowered his head as fresh tears fell, but these weren't heavy tears. They were freeing, healing. When the chanting ended, silence settled over the shrine. He stepped back from the altar, wiping his eyes. His grandmother approached him slowly. "It is done," she said with tenderness. "Your heart is lighter." Amani nodded. "I feel her calmer, like she's finally resting." The villagers watched quietly. Even his uncle, who had been hardest on him, stepped forward. His usually stern face softened. "Amani," the uncle said, clearing his throat, "you honored her today, more than any of us could have." Amani met his eyes, and for the first time, there was no tension, no distance. Just two men who had loved the same woman and carried different pieces of her grief. "Thank you," Amani said gently. He turned to face the village. For the first time in years, he didn't want to run. He didn't want to escape the past. He wanted to stay, to rebuild what he had broken, and to protect what his parents had loved. "Maybe I should remain here for a while," he said softly to his grandmother. "There's still so much I need to learn." She took his hand and squeezed it warmly. "Then stay," she said. "Your place has always been here, even when you were far away." Amani breathed deeply, feeling the weight he had carried for years finally lift from his shoulders. He wasn't empty anymore. He wasn't lost. He wasn't running. He was healing. He was becoming whole. The sun was just beginning to rise when Amani walked toward the small burial ground on the eastern side of the village. The morning air felt cool and clean, carrying the smell of wet grass and distant cooking fires. The birds were awake, singing softly as though welcoming a new day. Amani held the clay pot he and his grandmother had crafted, his mother's pot, the one he made to honor her. The surface was smooth beneath his fingers. It felt warm, almost alive, like it carried a heartbeat of its own. As he approached the graves, his steps slowed. He had not come here since the funeral. Back then, he couldn't stand the weight of his own anger. He had kept himself far from this place, thinking distance would dull the pain. But now, as he stood before his mother's resting place, he felt something different, something calm. Her grave was simple, covered with small white stones and surrounded by tall grass. Amani knelt beside it, placing the clay pot carefully at the center. He sat quietly for a moment, letting the rising sun wash over him. The warm light touched the top of the pot, making it shine softly. "I'm here, Mama," he whispered. His voice trembled, but it didn't break. "I'm here now." The wind moved gently through the trees, rustling the leaves above him. He placed a hand on the ground, feeling the soil, solid, steady, and warm from the sun. I know now, he continued softly. I know everything you carried, everything you tried to protect me from. A slow breath entered his lungs and left peacefully. For a long time, I was angry, not just at you, but at myself. His voice wavered. I blamed myself for not being there, for turning away from you. He closed his eyes. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm not running anymore. The wind brushed past him again, softer this time, like a gentle hand on his cheek. I forgive myself, he whispered. And I hope you forgive me too. Something inside him loosened, like a rope that had been wrapped tightly around his chest finally released. Tears filled his eyes, but they didn't hurt. They felt clean, pure. He looked at the clay pot, sitting proudly atop the stones. The water inside it shimmered in the sunlight. It reflected the sky, the trees, and Amani himself, a mirror of healing. This is for you, he said, for everything you gave, everything you carried alone. I will carry the rest with strength. He stood slowly, brushing the dirt from his hands. His heart felt different, lighter, fuller, steady. As he turned to walk away, he paused one last time. The graveyard was peaceful, glowing under the rising sun. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt safe. He walked back toward the village path, and with each step, the sunlight grew brighter. The shrine stood up ahead on the hill. The village beyond it buzzed with the sounds of life. Children laughing, fires crackling, elders speaking softly. Amani breathed deeply, letting the fresh air fill him. He wasn't returning to the city. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. His place was here for now, among the people who raised him, the traditions he had once rejected, and the memories he needed to rebuild. He reached the top of the hill and looked back at the shrine, the place where everything had begun, the place where he had finally listened to his mother's voice. Now it stood quiet and calm, like a guardian watching over the land. Amani smiled gently. I'm ready, he whispered. He took the next step forward, toward the village, toward his future, toward a life no longer filled with guilt but shaped by forgiveness and love. And as the sun rose fully, casting warm golden light across the shrine and the fields, Amani walked on with peace in his heart. The journey of pain had ended. A new journey, one shaped by healing, had just begun. A journey from guilt to forgiveness, from silence to connection, from loss to redemption. And Amani was finally home,